Australia built some of the most iconic cars to ever hit the open road. The thunder of a Holden Commodore, the grunt of a Ford Falcon, that unmistakable sound of something made right here for roads just like ours. But not everything that rolled off an Australian production line was a legend. Some were disasters. Some destroyed the very brands that built them. And some were so deeply disappointing, they broke the trust of hundreds of thousands of loyal Australian buyers who deserved so much better. Today, we're counting down the top 5 worst cars ever built in Australia. Not imported rubbish, not overseas hand-me-downs. These were designed here, assembled here, and sold to hard-working Australians who were promised something great. If you've ever owned one of these, you already know the pain. Hit like if Australian-made cars mean something to you. Subscribe so you never miss an episode, because we're going deep into Australia's automotive history, the glorious and the gut-wrenching. Let's get into it.
Number 5. Ford Capri, 1989 to 1994. Australia's convertible catastrophe. There is something uniquely heartbreaking about a dream car that becomes a nightmare, and for thousands of Australians in the early 90s, the Ford Capri was exactly that. Built at Ford's Broadmeadows plant in Victoria, the Capri was Australia's attempt at a fun, locally made convertible. The concept was genuinely exciting. A sports car, open top, built right here. Something different, something bold. Then people actually drove them. The convertible roof, the entire point of the car, leaked in the rain, jammed halfway, and refused to operate on cold mornings with stunning regularity. For a car built around the fantasy of open-air driving, a roof that didn't work was not a minor fault. It was the whole story. The turbocharged version added a new dimension of misery: engine fires, overheating, electrical systems that failed without warning or logic. The Capri Turbo became the car you bought with excitement and offloaded with relief. Ford quietly put the Capri out of its misery in 1994, after fewer than 19,000 were ever produced. It failed at the one thing it promised, being a car worth enjoying. And somehow, that makes it worse than if it had simply been forgettable.
Number 4. Mitsubishi 380, 2005 to 2008. The car that closed the factory gates forever. Some failures are loud and dramatic. The Mitsubishi 380 was quieter and in many ways far more devastating. Assembled at Mitsubishi's Tonsley plant in South Australia, the 380 arrived in 2005 as the replacement for the well-regarded Magna. Australia had supported Mitsubishi's local manufacturing for decades. This was supposed to be the next chapter. It turned out to be the final one. The 380 was a large family sedan with a 3.8-litre V6 engine built on Australian soil. On paper, there was nothing wrong with that. In showrooms, up against a sharp Holden Commodore and a purpose-built Ford Falcon, the 380 simply had no answer. The interior felt cheap, the performance was flat, and in a segment where brand loyalty runs bone deep, the 380 gave buyers no compelling reason to switch. Sales fell off a cliff. In 2008, Mitsubishi closed Tonsley permanently. Hundreds of workers lost their livelihoods. A manufacturing legacy spanning more than 50 years was erased in under 3 years by one car that couldn't find its audience. The 380 didn't just disappoint, it ended Australian Mitsubishi manufacturing for good. No other car on this list carries that weight. Do you remember the day Mitsubishi shut those gates? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear where you were. Number 3. Ford Falcon AU series, 1998 to 2002. The car that almost killed a legend. The Ford Falcon is one of the most sacred names in Australian automotive history. Families grew up in Falcons. Tradies relied on them. The name carried genuine meaning, toughness, reliability, Australian identity. The AU series nearly destroyed all of it. Launched in 1998 from the Broadmeadows plant in Victoria, the AU was supposed to modernise Australia's favourite car for a new era. What Ford delivered instead was a car that baffled, then angered its most loyal customers. The styling was immediately and brutally nicknamed the Jelly Bean. The rounded, bloated body looked nothing like the Falcons that had come before it. The proportions felt wrong. The front end looked unfinished. Ford's designers had clearly been experimenting. Unfortunately, the experiment was conducted on one of Australia's most beloved nameplates. Sales dropped sharply. Long-term Falcon buyers walked into Holden showrooms and didn't come back. And beyond the styling, early AU models suffered from interior quality issues. Brittle plastics, loose trim, a cabin that felt rushed, that were genuinely difficult to defend at the car's price point. Ford recovered with the Series 2 and 3 updates, and the BA Falcon that followed was a genuine return to form. But the damage from the AU years took a decade to repair, and some of that lost ground was never recovered. When you betray a loyal audience, they remember. Number 2. Holden Camira, 1982 to 1989. Holden's biggest embarrassment. Holden has given Australia the Monero, the Tirana, the Commodore, cars that Australians still talk about with pride and genuine affection. The Camira is not one of those cars. Built at Holden's Elizabeth plant in South Australia, the Camira was part of General Motors' global J-body program, a modern, fuel-efficient family car for a changing market. The idea made sense. The execution was a disaster that Holden spent years trying to live down. The rust came early and came hard. Body panels corroded within a few years under normal Australian conditions. Not coastal extremes, not outback heat, just everyday driving. The electrical systems were unreliable. Head gaskets failed at a rate that made mechanics shake their heads. Early automatic transmissions were so troublesome they became a standard warning in private used car ads. What made the Camira's failure cut so deeply was the trust involved. Holden asked Australians to follow them in a new direction. Australians showed up in good faith, and they watched their cars fall apart. The Camira was discontinued in 1989. It left behind a stain on Holden's reputation that took years of solid Commodores to wash away. If you owned a Camira, drop your story in the comments. We know it isn't short, and we know it isn't kind. Number 1. Leyland P76, 1973 to 1974. Australia's greatest automotive disaster. And here it is, the car that could have been a national icon and instead became the most spectacular single failure in Australian manufacturing history. The Leyland P76 was built by British Leyland Australia at their Zetland plant in New South Wales, launched in 1973 with genuine ambition behind it. A large, powerful, locally built car that could compete with anything from Detroit. A statement of what Australian manufacturing was capable of. It even won the Wheels Car of the Year award in 1973. For one brief, brilliant moment, it looked like British Leyland had actually pulled it off. Then the cars started reaching customers. Panel gaps you could fit your hand into, doors that wouldn't close cleanly, water leaking through seals that were never properly fitted, rust appearing on cars that were barely 6 months old. The build quality was so inconsistent, so staggeringly poor, that the P76's reputation collapsed almost as fast as it had been built. The boot was famous for being large enough to swallow a 44-gallon drum. Genuinely impressive, and also the only thing about the car that worked exactly as promised. British Leyland Australia went under in 1974, 1 year after launch. The factory closed, the workers were out, and thousands of buyers were left with cars that were already disintegrating around them. The P76 is remembered today by a small, passionate community of enthusiasts who love it for what it tried to be. And that devotion is real, and it is earned. But the Leyland P76 remains, without question, the most dramatic, most damaging, and most unforgettable failure ever to roll out of an Australian factory. Some dreams deserve to be remembered, even the ones that crash on takeoff.